My name is Danielle, and I'm 35 years old. 3 weeks ago, I buried my husband and my 8-year-old daughter on the same gray Tuesday morning, and my parents weren't there. They weren't sick. They weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't anywhere near a hospital or stranded at an airport with a canceled flight. They were on a beach in Cancun with my younger brother, Trevor, and his wife and kids, sipping drinks with little umbrellas in them while I stood over two caskets and tried to remember how to breathe. The accident happened on a Thursday night. Erin was driving our daughter Lily home from her gymnastics practice when a delivery truck ran a red light and crushed the driver's side of our minivan. Erin died instantly. Lily held on for 6 hours in the ICU before the machines couldn't do anything more for her. I got the call at 9:47 p.m. and I remember the exact time because I've replayed that moment in my head 1,000 times since, trying to find some version of that night where I picked up the phone sooner, where I said something different, where any of it changed the outcome. Nothing changes the outcome. They're both gone, and I am still here, which some days feels like the cruelest part of the whole thing. When I called my mother to tell her, she cried, or at least she made the sounds of crying, the kind that come out fast and performative and then stop the second the phone call ends. She said she'd call me back. She didn't call back for 2 days. When she finally did, she asked when the funeral was, and I told her Tuesday, and she got quiet in a way that should have warned me. But grief makes you stupid and trusting, because you assume everyone around you is operating from the same well of love and devastation that you are. She said Tuesday wasn't going to work for her and my father. They had a trip booked. Mexico. Non-refundable. I remember standing in my kitchen holding the phone away from my face like it had bitten me, because surely I had misheard. Surely my mother was not telling me that a vacation she'd booked months ago took priority over watching her son-in-law and her only grandchild lowered into the ground. But she was. She said it plainly, almost irritated that I was making her repeat herself. She said, and I will never forget the exact words, that the funeral was a trivial event not worth attending when weighed against losing the deposit on a resort suite. Trivial. My husband of 11 years and my daughter, the only grandchild she would ever have from me, reduced to a scheduling inconvenience that lost out to an all-inclusive package in Quintana Roo. I didn't even have the energy to scream at her. I just hung up the phone and sat on my kitchen floor for a long time, the same floor where Lily used to do her homework while I made dinner, the same floor Erin used to lie on to wrestle with her after work, laughing until she shrieked. I sat there until it got dark outside and I didn't bother turning on the lights. The funeral happened without them. My brother Trevor didn't come either, which somehow stung less, because Trevor has always orbited wherever our parents go, like he never developed the spine to exist as a separate person from them. 2 caskets, one impossibly small, and a church half full of Erin's co-workers, my few close friends, and his elderly aunt who flew in from Ohio despite needing a cane to walk. My parents' seats sat empty in the front row, the row reserved for immediate family, the row that should have held the people who supposedly loved us most. I found out later, through a cousin who still talks to me, that they posted photos from the resort that same week. My mother in a sundress by an infinity pool, my father holding a coconut drink, both of them smiling like nothing in the world had touched them, while 3 states away I was choosing a headstone for my little girl. I didn't say anything to them after that phone call. I went quiet, which for anyone who knows me is its own kind of warning sign, because I am not a person who goes quiet when I'm hurt. I write letters. I make calls. I confront things. But this particular wound was so deep, so fundamentally disorienting, that I didn't know what version of myself was supposed to respond to it. The woman who buried her family 3 days ago, or the daughter who still, somewhere underneath all that grief, wanted her mother to just say sorry and mean it. Neither version got the chance, because 8 days after the funeral, while I was still wearing the same cardigan I'd worn to the burial because I couldn't bring myself to do laundry, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was light, casual, like she was calling to ask about a recipe. She told me she and my father needed to talk to me about something important, something financial, and that it really couldn't wait. I should have hung up right then. I should have known that anyone capable of calling my husband and daughter's funeral trivial was not calling me 8 days later out of grief or guilt. But I answered anyway, because some small, foolish part of me still wanted to believe she was calling to apologize. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to ask me for $40,000. My mother's voice was so calm asking for that money that for a moment I thought I'd misheard her, the same way I'd thought I misheard her about the funeral. $40,000. She said it the way someone asks to borrow a cup of sugar, like it was a small, reasonable thing between people who loved each other. When I asked her why, she said Trevor had gotten into some trouble with a business venture, some restaurant investment that had gone sideways, and that the family needed to come together to help him before he lost his house. Come together. The same family that couldn't come together long enough to sit in a church pew for 45 minutes. I asked her directly if she understood what she was asking me, a woman who had buried her husband and daughter 11 days earlier, to do. She said, and her tone shifted into something sharper now, almost accusing, that I had probably gotten a large life insurance payout from Aaron's policy, and that it wasn't fair for me to be sitting on that money while my brother lost everything he'd built. She said family helps family, completely unaware, or unwilling to acknowledge, the irony dripping off every word. I told her I needed to think about it, mostly because I needed to get off the phone before I said something I couldn't take back, and she said fine, but that they needed an answer by the weekend because the bank was calling Trevor's loan due. After I hung up, I sat with that phone in my lap for a long time, and something in me that had been numb for 11 days finally cracked open into something colder and clearer. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was done being quiet. I decided I wasn't going to give them an answer over the phone. I called my mother back 2 days later and told her that my father and Trevor should come to my house Saturday afternoon so we could discuss it properly as a family, since that word seemed to matter so much to her when money was involved. She sounded pleased, like she'd already spent the $40,000 in her head. Saturday came and they arrived together, my parents and Trevor, all smiling that same plastic resort smile I'd seen in the photos. I'd asked Aaron's brother, Spencer, to sit in the next room, and I'd set my phone on the coffee table recording, not hidden, just sitting there in plain view, because I wanted them to know exactly what was happening. I started by asking my father, calmly, to repeat what my mother had told me about the funeral being a trivial event. He hesitated, glancing at her, and she jumped in trying to soften it, saying it had come out wrong, that she'd been stressed about the trip and didn't mean it that way. I told her I had saved the voicemail where she said almost the exact words, and I played 11 seconds of it right there on the table. The room went silent. Trevor wouldn't look at me. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, the way he always says nothing when things get uncomfortable, letting my mother absorb the impact alone. I told them that I had spent 11 days planning 2 funerals, picking out a coffin small enough for an 8-year-old, while they posted pool photos from a resort, and that I had spent every night since wondering what kind of people raise a daughter and then can't be bothered to grieve with her. Then I told them about the $40,000. I said I actually did receive a payout from Aaron's policy, and that I had already decided what I was going to do with every cent of it, none of which involved bailing out a failed restaurant investment for a brother who couldn't be bothered to show up either. My mother started to argue, said I was being cruel and dramatic, that this was exactly the kind of thing that tears families apart over money. I told her the money had nothing to do with what tore this family apart. What tore it apart happened the moment she chose an infinity pool over her granddaughter's funeral. That was when I watched their faces actually change, all 3 of them at once, the practiced calm draining out and something close to real fear creeping in, because they realized I wasn't bluffing and I wasn't going to be guilt back into the role of obedient daughter who quietly funds their mistakes. My father finally spoke, said they'd made a mistake, that they were sorry, but it came out flat and rehearsed, more concerned with damage control than with Lily or Aaron. I told them I appreciated the apology, but apologies don't undo absence, and that from that day forward I no longer considered them my parents in any meaningful sense, and Trevor was no longer my brother. I said they were welcome to call themselves my family on paper, on a birth certificate somewhere, but that real family shows up, and they had proven exactly what kind of people they were when it mattered most. They left my house that afternoon without the money and without me, and I haven't spoken to any of them since. I built a small memorial garden in my backyard for Aaron and Lily instead, somewhere I can sit every evening and talk to them, somewhere that means more to me than $40,000 ever could, somewhere that belongs only to the people who actually loved me. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because more stories like this one are coming, stories about real strength, real betrayal, and the courage it takes to walk away from people who were never really family at all.